I just got off a call with a new coaching client who we'd only had a couple of DMs on TikTok. So it was like brand new, didn't know anything about her coming into this call. And she's having a lot of trouble in her marriage. And she was struggling with a very emotionally dysregulated child as well. And there's a lot of heaviness, and she was almost boiling over in tears just as soon as we got on the call. And she kept kind of trying to explain, like she was driving and she had to pull over and she was just kind of very stressed. And I had to pause her and go, "You're safe. You don't have to explain anything to me. I am here to create space for you, and we're going to talk about what's going on. So tell me why you reached out to me." And we started in on it, primarily because her marriage has been struggling, that they have just been really harsh on each other, very critical, saying some pretty horrid things to each other. She gave me this example of, she got this lamp for the living room that she'd been looking for a year, and she finally got it. And she, her husband came home and she asked him like what he thought of the lamp, and he made some kind of just like dismissive remark. And then she snapped back, "Oh, well, that's a very his name kind of thing to say." And he spat back saying, "Well, that's a very bleep thing to say," called her a name. And she, then they just kind of like ignored each other after that. Like it was just two hurtful things to say. And she was saying like, "That was a mean thing to say." And he's like, "Well, you started it." And, just bickering, almost like siblings, right? But this is the person that you've chosen to do life with, and you're talking to each other that way. And you kind of get lost in the forest, can't see the forest through the trees. And they had gotten to where it's so critical and they're just so reactive to each other. But when I started asking her, has it always been that way? She said, "No, we used to have this safe word, this like, hey, I'm triggered," and they would go give each other a kiss, but they've since stopped doing that. And I asked, "Are you dating each other?" "No, we have stopped doing that." It's like, wow, all the things that used to make your relationship work, especially before kids, we've stopped doing. So it's not all that surprising that the stress of work and the stress of life and the stress of kids, and especially emotionally dysregulated kid, and your own unhappiness, now all of a sudden we're like projecting that onto our partner. And when we're in survival mode and you're both in survival mode, you tend to seek your partner to save you from survival, and any little criticism, any little chink in the perfection that you expect them to have, all of a sudden means that we start to lash out at them. And that's the person that we've chosen to do life with. We love them. We're treating them worse than we would treat any other person in our life. Why is that? So we started to look at, he wasn't on the call. I can't coach to somebody who's not open to coaching. He wasn't on the call. We're focusing on her. So we're looking at, where is her part in this? Now, it's not her job to fix her husband. It is not her job to enable her husband. Her job is to own her actions and own her beliefs and own her thoughts, and we go from there. And so she was very much wanting to try and salvage her marriage, even though she feels like she's checking out. Totally fine. And my suggestion to her was, whether you get divorced, whether you stay married, we don't know what the outcome of that's going to be quite yet. But my recommendation to you is give everything you have to try to make it work, so that if you choose to walk away at any point, you did everything in your power to make it work. That's so much easier to leave. Well, not easier to leave a relationship, but it feels almost peaceful to leave a relationship when you have done everything. And she's like, "I think so. I'm not quite done. Like, I know there's probably more I can do." And I said, "Great. This is where we put aside ego and we use vulnerability." So you guys are very conditioned to have this very contentious, reactive interactions with each other. So now that you're aware that really what's underlying all of that, the lamp thing, she wanted connection with her husband. That's it. She was like, "Hey, I'm trying to create a beautiful home. Here's something I've done. What do you think?" And he was kind of like snarky in his remark, and it hurt her. She was seeking connection, and her desire for connection ended up with her getting hurt. So she lashed out, he lashed out, and then there we are. But ultimately what was underlying all of that was connection. And in her criticism towards him, he felt disconnected, so he lashed out. They were both acting like children, which I get. We learned that in childhood. But ultimately, what was really at the base of all that was connection. Same thing with her daughter and her emotional dysregulation. Kids pick up on the environment. While they may not be saying these things in front of the kids pick up on the tension in the parents, especially if it's ongoing and long term. And so that kid feels out of control of her environment. So how is she getting control? She is creating attention by emotionally getting really dysregulated, but that kid is seeking attention and connection as well. So this whole family is craving connection. And when we kind of had that clarity moment for her that that's what was underlying all of this stuff, now all of a sudden she kind of felt this desire to help nurture her family, to connect, to put the ego down, right? To not be like, "Oh, well, it's his fault and this fault." It's like, no, we need to come together as a family and co-create what it is we want to do moving forward. We need to focus on connection. How do we both, husband and wife, want to feel when we walk into the door of our home? How can we start to work towards that, as opposed to, my home is my stressful place. Like, he goes golfing for a long time and she needs to feel like she needs to escape. It's like, how do we make home our escape? It probably used to be, but given life and stressors and money and all this stuff, like, we get away from that. And it's like, hold on, pause. Get back to what really matters, which is your connection amongst each other. And it's not going to be fixed overnight, but how can we be intentional about what we're creating from here forward? Now, that was the conversation that she's excited to now have. That's where her 10 level energy was at the end. She was excited to go have this conversation with her partner. She can't control what he's going to say. She can't control whether he wants to be a part of that, whether he wants to fix the relationship, whether he's checked out. She has no control of that. What she has control over is her excitement towards having a conversation and maybe a little bit of hope that things might start to improve. And I paused her at the end of the conversation. I said, look, nothing about your life has actually changed. Like, your life externally is still the same from an hour ago when you were boiling over with tears, just jumping on a call, and now you're lit up and you're excited. So notice how powerful your thoughts are, because nothing in your life has changed except what was between the ears. So at any given point in time, if you're unhappy with how you're feeling, chances are where you're focusing on and your perspective is what's driving that feeling. And at any given moment, you can shift a perspective. You can do some breath work. You can clear your thoughts. You can look at things from a different lens. And sometimes it takes somebody outside of the emotion of it to draw your attention to it, right? That's why coaches are great. Friends that aren't enmeshed in your relationships, therapists are great, to get somebody else to come in like, hey, all of this nuance, all of these situations, really what's the underlying need that needs to be met in your relationship or with your family or with your children? And chances are we're all craving and seeking connection. We kind of lose that in translation. So that's my gift to you, is that at any given point, you have control over where your choices are, where your attention are, and where your focus is, as long as you're intentional and aware that that's what you're choosing. So what is it you're choosing that's affecting how you're feeling? And hey, my name's Tara, and I'm on a mission to create a self-aware army, because it's lonely in these self-aware streets.